Makkot, Daf Yomi Makkot, Wholeness, Berya. Yesterday we had a mind-blowing idea out of a few words in a Tosfos, and the same will apply today. Mind-blowing idea from a few words in a Tosfos, where we really look at the difference between when the Torah describes a commodity and when the Torah defines the identity of an object or of a thing or of a being, and how that works differently. We're dealing with two isurim in the Torah, two prohibitions in the Torah. The one in Parshas Emor is V'lo yechalulu et kodshei b'nei Yisrael et asher yaribu laHashem, that a non-Kohen is not allowed to eat from Truma, from that which has been set aside for Kohanim. And in Parshas Shmini, our Parsha this week, V'chol asheretz ashoretz al haaretz sheketz hu lo ye'achel, any insect that crawls on the earth may not be eaten. The din of tevel means something from which Truma has not yet been taken. So if a non-Kohen eats from tevel, he's eating from something, part of which belongs to the Kohen. Asks our Mishnah back on Daf Yud Gimel, Kama yochal min tevel v'yehe chayav. How much tevel? You've got a whole container of flour, let's say, from which Truma has not been taken. So it's called tevel. How much do you have to eat in order to be chayav malkut, to be guilty of an offense which would be deserving of malkut, of these lashes? So we have a machlokus. Rabbi Shimon omer kol shehu v'chachamim merimim kazais. Rabbi Shimon says it doesn't matter how little, 1 grain of that wheat or flour, and you chayav. The Chachamim say you need a kazayis in all matters of the Torah. If it's an eating law, you need a kazayis, as we know very well from our Pesach experience. Rabbi Shimon, doesn't always have to be a kazayis. And if you eat an ant, is that not a lav? Is that not a chiyuv malchus? Just an ant. It's tiny. That's why we're so careful about bugs in our food. You can't just say it's bottle. It doesn't count. It doesn't matter how small it is. Says the Chachomim, you can't compare an ant to a grain. An ant is a beriah. That's a word that we use in halacha a lot. The word is a beriah. We'll define what it means. But let's understand for the moment it's a complete creature. And if it's a creature, it doesn't matter how small it is. There are two implications of this. Number one, it never is batel. You can't say it's batel b'shishim. There's more than 60 amount of the time against the little ant. Little ant falls into a huge pot of soup. That's done. You can't. The ant is not bottled. You can't eat the whole pot and say, well, yes, somewhere in the pot there was an ant, but it was just a little ant and there was a lot of soup. That's not going to work because the ant is not bottled because it's a beriah. And the other thing is it doesn't have to be a kazayis. To be over the issur of eating an insect, it doesn't have to be a kazayis. It doesn't matter how small it is. So says Rabbi Shimon to then, don't you agree that an ant is, even if it's tiny? So, and they said, no, but wheat is not a beriah. He says, yes, it is. A chita achat is also keberiata. That's also, it's not a creature, but it's a complete item. It's a thing. It's a grain of wheat. Maybe flour would be different, but a grain of wheat should be. So the our Gemara on Daf Yud Zayin goes a little deeper into it. And we've got a discussion with Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, machlokes bechita val bekemach divrei al kol kazayit. Here we have the case of flour. If it's been ground into flour, everybody agrees a kazayit. And Rabbi Yirmi and Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish says in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, no, even there's a machloket, and even there Rabbi Shimon, for different reasons, holds that even with flour, it doesn't matter how small the amount is, because Rabbi Shimon holds in essence that for the chiyuv malchus, we don't deal with shiurim. They're not quantitative measures for it. Gemara goes backwards and forwards to make sense of it. And then the Gemara says that the discussion in the Mishnah really is Rabbi Shimon saying, I hold that even flour, it doesn't matter how little, because there's no measurement when it comes to the chiyuv malchus, says Rabbi Shimon. Doesn't matter how small the amount is. But you who hold that it has to be a kazayit, surely you, chachomim, who say it has to be a kazayit, it has to be the size of an olive, will agree that just as an ant is also, even if it's very small, so 1 grain of wheat should be also for the same reason. Says the Gemara, no. Rabbona, beriyat neshama chashuva, chita lo chashuva. A wheat is not important enough. A grain of wheat is not important enough. An ant is important because it has neshama in it. It's a live creature. When we talk about a beriah, we're talking about a live creature, not just a complete object. Asks Tosfos, that's very strange, because in Chulin Daf Tzadivav, which is where a lot of the sugya takes place, and we'll get there in not too long, Amrin and shani gid de beriahu. When we talk about a gid anasheh, the sinew on the back leg of an animal that we're not allowed to eat, midoraisa, that sinew is also not batel. You can't put it into the soup and say, well, it's batel, there's a lot of soup. Lo batel. Why? Because it's a beriah. V'afagav delet be'en neshama, but it's not alive. How can the Gemara say that according to the Chachomim, beriat neshama, the Rabbanan say, beriat neshama chashuva, chita lo chashuva. So what about the sinew from the hind leg? Why is that called a beriah in Gemara Chulin? And the Gemara says, the Tosfos answers, yeah, it's different. Kivan da'atya mi beriat neshama. The gid anasheh comes from a living creature. Ask Tosfos, but that also doesn't work because a nevela, if an animal is not slaughtered properly, it dies without being killed according to halacha. It's called a nevela. And if you take a piece of that nevela, is that a beriah? No, you take a steak off an animal that wasn't slaughtered. And then you want to claim that it was bottled, and what you're going to say, no, it's a beriah because it came from a live animal. It is bottled. We don't call it bottled. So says Tosfos, I don't understand how this works. Therefore, says Tosfos, a different answer. Ela bal kochach al kochacha hatam talui dechol. Here's the gem. Dechol she'oved shemo k'shenechtach havi beriah. Anything which, when it's cut into pieces, loses its name, is not called a beriah. That's what Tosfos says. Now, we've talked before about what Tosfos is. Tosfos is the writings of the Talmudim in the yeshivas, where they wrote up the shiurim of their Rosh Yeshivas. And usually the Rosh Yeshivas checked over these write-ups, but they weren't written by them. So we've talked about in Makkos, it's Talmidei Rabbeinu Peretz. It's the Talmidim of Rabbeinu Peretz who write up the Tosfos based on their notes from the shiurim of Rabbeinu Peretz. So one can assume that this was something that Rabbeinu Peretz taught, and one has to try and understand it. We have another sefer. We have a Tosfos Shantz, but I discovered in my edition of the Tosfos Shantz, there's a Tosfos Shantz, but there's also an additional version of the Tosfos Shantz, which is actually not the Tosfos Shantz. The Tosfos of Rabbeinu Peretz, which were mistakenly published as Tosfos Rabbeinu Shantz. So this is another group of Talmidei Rabbeinu Peretz. So we've got the Tosfos, and Tosfos is very, very short and brief. What does that mean? If it loses its name when you cut it, it's no longer a beriah. What's the name got to do with it? Cutting it, it's so cryptic. It's very difficult to understand what Tosfos means. So I looked around for maybe there are other Talmidim who explain Rabbeinu Peretz a little differently. And I found at the back of my version, I couldn't find it online to copy it for you, but I found it quoted in a sefer called Natan Pirio, which is a Rosh Yeshiva in Bnei Brak. He died only 15 years ago, and then he wrote up his shiurim, and in his shiurim he quoted Tosfos Shantz. As I say, it isn't really Tosfos Shantz. It is actually, we now know it's actually Talmidei Rabbeinu Peretz. It's a different Talmidim. And here, if you look in the quote, you'll see he quotes the Tosfos Rabbeinu Peretz, Talmidei Rabbeinu Peretz, published as Tosfos Rabbeinu Shantz. And as I say, this is important because we're looking at the same source of the knowledge. It's Rabbeinu Peretz. It's Rabbeinu Peretz explained cryptically in our Tosfos, and it's Rabbeinu Peretz explained more expansively in the Tosfos Talmidei Rabbeinu Peretz, published as the Tosfos Rabbeinu Shantz. Sounds complicated, but it isn't. D'chol davar she'ibed shmo kshu merusak she'eino nikra bishmo harishon. When something loses its name once it's mashed up, ground, and is no longer known by its original name, Kagon, for example, and he gives a beautiful example, Nesher, an eagle. Eagle is a beautiful name. That's an eagle, and everybody comes out and you look, you get your binoculars out to see this beautiful eagle. Shushalem nikra Nesher. If it's a whole eagle, it's an eagle. V'chaticha achat mimenu. But if there's only a piece of eagle left, you don't get out your binoculars to look at the piece of eagle and say, my goodness, this is eagle. Okay, it's not the whole eagle, but it's part of the eagle. No, you're not interested. You've lost complete interest. The whole eagle is an eagle. A piece of eagle is a piece of meat. It's not an eagle anymore at all. That's what we mean. A piece of gid hanasheh, of this sinew, is called sinew. It's not called gid hanasheh anymore. אלא חתיכה מגיד אנשי. It's called a piece of גיד אנשי. אבל נבלה, אפילו חתיכה ממנו נקראת נבלה. But you talk about a nevela, even if it's a steak. If it's just a slice of steak, you say, this is nevela, this is treif. This is nevela would be a more accurate word than treif. We use the word treif generically, but it isn't treif. If you take a piece of steak that was slaughtered incorrectly, whether by a shochet who made a mistake, or by a Muslim slaughterer, or by a regular slaughterer, that's nevela, it's not treifa. So we say you can't eat the steak, it's nevela, so it hasn't lost its name. It was nevela when the whole animal was lying on the carcass was on the floor. It was a nevela. Piece of steak, it's still a nevela. V'lo avda shma harishon, and it hasn't lost its original name. Lefichach lo chashiv le beriah, and therefore it's not a beriah. And he goes on, this Reb Nosson Gestetner goes on, and it just explains the chol davar mekabel shem miyuchad al yedei shleimuto. When something is named because of its completion, because it's a complete system, it gets its name. Ucheshenigra mishleimuto. And when its shleimus, when its completion is diminished, mistalek mimenu shem hamiyuchad, that name given to it by the Torah no longer applies to it. There you see, it's called that not because of its substance, it's called that because of its wholeness, of its integration. And so what do we see here in this Tosfos? We see that a kazayis is a quantitative measure. A beriah is a qualitative term. So you talk about, you say, this is an ant, it's a tiny ant, it's not a kazayis. It doesn't matter how much. If something has a shem miyuchad caused by its shleimut, if something is given an identity, is given a term, a definition, because of its completion, its wholeness, that doesn't matter how small it is. And you'll see in a moment why that's so important conceptually. And if something is given a name for its wholeness, ant, it's an ant, that's a beriah. A gid anoshe, it doesn't know. A gid anoshe is, if it's a piece of gid anoshe, it's no longer gid anoshe. Gid anoshe is a halachic concept in its shleimut, in its completion. And therefore, if it's one of those things that is given an identity because of its completion, not only doesn't it matter how small it is, it can never be batel. It can never become adulterated and diluted. You cannot dilute quality. You can dilute quantity. If you have 100 items of treif and you mix it up with 1,000,000 items of kosher, it's all kosher because that's how quantity works. If you're eating a certain amount, it has to be a certain quantity, otherwise it's not eating. But when you're talking about quality, it's never too small and it never dilutes. Now let's take that quantity into life. So what about a human being? If you are who you are because you're a whole human being, you're not trying to imitate somebody else, you're not part of who you could be, you haven't left a part of who you could be apart and aside, you've developed the whole you, with your passions and your taste and your thoughts and your feelings and your values and your knowledge and your heritage and background. That's all who you are. You see yourself as that identity and you see others that way. It doesn't matter how small you are. You're never irrelevant. It doesn't matter. Once you become a piece of yourself, once you're inauthentic, now you're acting out like a frumer yid, you're acting out like a yeshiva bocha, but you're leaving aside your natural passions, you're leaving aside some of the things you were raised with, because now you've made yourself into this new little box, which is some of you, but not all of you. Then you get diluted. Then you're just one of a mass, you get diluted and you can become bottle, and it does matter how small you are, because if you're too small, you're irrelevant. But if you're an authentic human being, if you are your whole self, everything you bring to the table, that's never too small, that can never be bottled. When Hillel used to come to Simchas Beis HaShoeva, the Gemara says in Sukkah Daf Nun Gimel, he used to say, Im ani kan hakol kan. If I'm here, everybody's here. Im ein ani kan, mi kan. If I'm not here, who's here? Strange thing for Hillel HaZokin to say. Explains Reb Shmuel Rozovsky an unbelievable idea in the Sefer HaZikaron. Im ani kan means if I come to a mitzvah with all of me, authentically, I bring everything of me to the mitzvah, all of my mind, my thoughts, my excitement, my feelings, my passions, my imagination, my Yetzer Hara and my Yetzer Tov, the whole package I bring. Hakol kan. Then everything's here. Doesn't matter how small I am, I am everything if I am here. If the ani shebi, if the me in myself is there. And if I'm not there, if I come and do a mitzvah and it's not the full me, it's a piece of me. Most of me is I've left behind somewhere. My mind is somewhere else. I'm davening in the kollel, but my mind is somewhere else. I'm learning Torah, but my mind is somewhere else. I'm on my cell phone. That's not anikan. I'm not here. I'm not present. This isn't all of me. If it isn't all of you, you're a quantitative element, because now you're talking about how much of you. If you're talking about how much, you're quantity. That's not quality. If it's everything, if you are a complete working unit, that's everything. And if everything is there, it doesn't matter how small, never irrelevant, and it can never become bottle. You have a similar idea. There's a Rashi in Brochos on Daf Vav, where Rashi explains that Dvorim hamdim berumo shel olam, one of the things that stand berumo shel olam, at the height of the universe, Rashi says is tefillah. And Reb Simcha Zissel explains that what that means is tefillah is omed berumo shel olam because it's meirim et ha'olam, because tefillah uplifts the world, because a human being is the olam. When you're davening, it uplifts you, and you are a universe. If you're all there, if everything of you is there, you are a universe. And if you are uplifted, the universe gets uplifted with you. If you've only brought a piece of you to the davening, if you're an inauthentic you because you're trying to be something or someone else, and so you've pruned all the bits off yourself, so the only piece that really comes is the piece you want everybody to see because that's how you want to be identified, but it's not ani, it's not the real me, then you're not Noilam. Then you're a quantitative collection of things. Just in these words of Tosfos. It says, Tosfos, what it means is, Elo akochach atam talui dekach, dekol she'oved shemo kashenechtach, havi berya. If the name, and then we come to the Talmud Rabbeinu Peretz's example with the eagle. If the whole eagle is here, you are an eagle. And you say, you see somebody looking at the eagle with their binoculars, you say, an eagle, but it's just a little eagle. Why are you looking at it? If you look at a big eagle, it doesn't matter if it's big or small. A little eagle is as impressive as a big eagle. An ant is as impressive as a lion because it's a complete system. It's the whole thing. If it's the whole thing, it doesn't matter how small. If it's the whole thing, it doesn't matter how much it's mixed up in other things. It always stands out. The whole thing, the authentic thing, the real you, the real me, always stands out, can never be obliterated by quantity. Quality cannot be obliterated by quantity. Only quantity can be obliterated by quantity. And so we have to work on ourselves and go on that journey of making sure that in all we do, all the time, in our relationships, in our bein adam lechavera, how we relate to people, in our businesses, in our professions, in our avodas Hashem, in the way we serve the Ribbono Shel Olam, in the way we learn Torah, that it's all of us, that this isn't an inauthentic little me that I've created to fit in. If you've created a little you to fit in, ein anikan, then I'm not here, and me kan, then who's here? Nobody's here. But if I nikan, if I bring my whole self, this being that if a piece of it is cut off, becomes a quantitative being rather than a qualitative being, that's a beriah, that's a creation. That's something real, that's something magnificent. And as a magnificent being, no person is too small to be irrelevant, and no person is too irrelevant in the large crowd to be unidentifiable and to have lost their relevance. No matter how small, a beriah is always relevant. A beriah is always important.